I, as a student, became involved with Buckminster Fuller, and he had a big influence on what I did, both at university and in work. I found him absolutely fascinating because he was interested in the way that the world worked and was thinking in systems rather than what a building looks like. He was more interested in how the building functioned, and that was something that appealed to me strongly. And then in 1968, he introduced me to Stafford, the cyberneticist, and Bucky Fuller asked him to take me under his wing, which he did, because obviously Fuller was in the States and he couldn't be involved with me in the way that Stafford could, who guided me and taught me the basics of systems thinking, which is basic to what I've been doing ever since. Stafford organized my thinking and taught me how to organize my work in a way that I'd never been taught through my architectural studies. And he developed for me a pattern of work which fitted with Fuller's ideas about people like myself who had an architectural training, using their broad knowledge of how the world works in terms of technology to develop a survival approach to design so that you're using a whole range of skills but in an integrated way. So that, for instance, he structured what he called a work structure for me, which consisted of looking at energy, food, information, shelter, and transport as an integrated whole. And that I found and have found a hugely effective way of thinking, because you do not think of things in isolation from one another. And the efficiencies which you can achieve that way can be quite dramatic. To make the set of technologies work in the same sort of survival-related way. Because he pointed out that the first principle of any viable system has to be its own survival. And that's what I've been trying to do over the last, since 1974, when he developed this thinking system for me. Well, Fuller wrote a book which was published in 1969 called Utopia or Oblivion, The Prospects for Humanity. And in that book, he was saying that there was a high probability that unless humanity changed the way that it used the world's resources, that it would become extinct. In other words, he was talking about a very high level of existential risk. And the kind of thing that he'd asked Stafford to help me understand was how you might start to structure a way to try and prevent that risk increasing to the point where the oblivion would occur. All the indications are that the environmental crisis is going to accelerate, and its impact on humanity will be lethal if we do not seriously organize in entirely different ways the way that we use the world's resources. One thing that maybe I should mention, and that is that, and this relates back to Bucky Fuller and his concern to see that people started to organize themselves for the kind of effects that climate change are going to cause. He identified this in several of his books, including the book Utopia or Oblivion, and he identified this as a period which he referred to as the final examination, which is humanity's sort of test. And he defined the final examination as a period, a soon-to-be experienced period of acute social and environmental disruption, which will determine whether humanity will be able to fulfill its purpose in the universe. And he and Stafford tried over a number of years to get schools of architecture around the world to work on this. And in the end, they gave up because none of the schools was interested in being involved in this. And I was the only person who was prepared to make the effort to try to see whether the basic concept, which Fuller and Beer had put together around the structure that he developed for me would work. And so far, in my experience, it does seem to offer that potential. Recognizing real problems and how best to tackle them in the short time that we have left before catastrophe strikes.